Good evening. Welcome. Bienvenidas. My name is Jordana Mendelson. I am the director of NYU's KJCC, a center dedicated to Spain and the Spanish-speaking world. On behalf of Assistant Director Marina Garde, our Public Humanities Fellow Juan Manuel Avila Conejo, both of which do amazing work for us and a whole series with Chuen this year, and our incredible KJCC staff, we are honored to introduce our program for tonight, Race Narratives Through Contemporary Media, with this semester's KJC Chair Quan Zhou. And this is the first of many amazing, spectacular events with Chuen. Now I'm like sorry, we've had a discussion about pronunciation. And since I'm nervous, I'm just getting all kinds of things wrong. I will underline again the correct pronunciation, and Chuen will also remind us. Before we start our program, we want to acknowledge that the land on which our center is located is the homeland of the Nape people. We recognize the continued significance of these lands for Lenape nations past and present. It is truly an honor for us to welcome our Spring 2024 KJC Chair in Spanish Culture and Civilization, Chuen Zhou, to NYU. Chuen is one of the most prominent illustrators in Spain today, representing a new generation of artists and writers who draw from their experiences as Afro and Asian descendant Spaniards to raise questions about Spain's inherited ideals about nation, race, class, and gender. Using humor, Gazpacho Agridulce, una autobiografía chino-andaluza from 2015, was her first book and the first book published in Spain to treat the subject of race from the perspective of a Spanish-born Chinese author. She was among a select group of artists, performers, and writers featured in Stony Brook's online conference Pensando Chibanya, Voices from the Chinese Diaspora in Spain from 2021, which introduced many of us here in the US to Chuen and her works thanks to Mary Kate Donovan, who is here tonight as part of our program, and Moises Hassan Bendahan. And really, I can't underline how important that series of events was. It really broke a lot of ground for those of us for whom a lot of these artists were new. So I really, we wouldn't have Chuen here tonight, actually, without Mary Kate and Moises. In addition to her graphic novels, Chuen is also a columnist and has developed the podcast Movidas Varias, which I highly recommend. You will learn from tonight's event that Chuen is very high key in terms of her intellectual breadth and depth, but incredibly accessible in her tone and candor. And it is a rare mix that I think we talk a lot about public humanities and public intellectuals, and I think you're going to see tonight that that comes with the greatest of energy in Chuen's ability to communicate very, very complicated and complex ideas, which are very accessible. Her latest book is La Agridolce Vida, so I'm going to hold it up here. This is my copy, so if you look at it after, please do not walk away with it. You can also get it for yourself. There will be an English translation coming out soon. While she is here, she's teaching a graduate seminar on art and diversity in Spain from the periphery, an experience that I've had the privilege of co-teaching with her, and some of our students are in the audience, so really grateful to them as well. For today's talk, Chuen will be in conversation with Wan Sonya Tang from Boston College and Mary Kate Donovan from Skidmore College about her work and how different contemporary media have influenced and impacted the expression of race issues in contemporary Spain from a Sino-Spanish perspective. And here I have to apologize. Mary Kate and Juan are two of the most accomplished scholars of their generation working on peninsular studies, and I'm saying 2 lines about them. So please look on our website, look them up. They are incredible, important references for everyone interested in these and other issues. So I just want to explain that I'm being brief for time, but not because of lack of deep respect for their work. Mary Kate is Associate Professor of Spanish and Director of Media and Film Studies at Skidmore College, and she is working currently on a book manuscript that studies representations of the Chinese diaspora in contemporary Spain. Wan Sonya Tang is Assistant Professor of Hispanic Studies and the Director of the Asian American Studies program at Boston College. Her book, Specters, Monsters, and the Damned, Fantastic Threats to the Social Order in 19th Century Spanish Fiction, is forthcoming with Vanderbilt University Press. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the Asian Pacific American Institute, the Department of East Asian Studies, and the Department of Spanish and Portuguese here at NYU. Before I turn the floor over, I also want you to open your calendars, Google or paper, and mark the following 3 dates down so that you can come back. March 7th, we are going to be having an exhibition opening of Chuen's work here at KJCC at 5 p.m. Really exciting work that she's doing around women scientists, just fantastic project around disseminating science. March 8th is Day of the Woman, so come celebrate the day before with us. And at 7 p.m. that same day is going to be the second of her public events on maternidades y feminismos en España, interseccionalidad y decolonialidad, with Safia El Adam and Desiree Bella Lobede, two amazing activists in Spain who are really doing fantastic work, not only about the position of women, but also the position of mothers and women's care in Spain in relation to race and political activism. And then on April 4th, the third of the public events is Periferias de los Feminismos, Edad y Territorio, with Berna Wang, an amazing poet, and Veronica Ruth Frias, an amazing artist, and Julia Chang, who is going to be coming as our moderator. And we are going to be closing the program with sadness, but festivities, with a conversation and performance with Chenta Sai, who, if you don't know, you can look up Chenta on YouTube and videos, and their work is going to blow you away. That's going to be followed by a super party. And we are going to bring in some other kinds of food to celebrate. Chuan and I are conspiring. We're not sure yet. Following our conversation, we also want to invite you to a special reception in recognition of the Chinese Lunar New Year. We have been having a great time with Chuan exploring Chinatown and all of its delicious delights. So I would say if you're used to coming to our events for quesos y vinos, we still have the vinos, but we have some other food for tonight. Without any more commentary, I want to turn the floor over to our speakers. It's going to be Mary Kate first, then Wan, and then Chuan, and then they're going to join us here for a conversation, and we will have time for Q&A with all of you in the public afterwards. So thank you, and please help me welcome all three to our...
Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jordana, for such a very warm welcome. I feel like that energy really expresses the same feeling that I'm having today, which is a great pleasure, and it's really an honor to have been invited. I want to thank Chuan, who I also call Quan, but we will maybe talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A. Jordana, Marina, Juan Manuel, and the rest of the staff here at the KJCC for organizing. As I said, it's truly an honor to be invited, and I'm also really delighted to share the stage with Quan and Wan, who I consider inspiring intellectuals, but also colleagues and friends. So I'm just very happy to be here. So I think both of us tonight are going to talk a little bit about how we encountered Quan's work, Chuan's work. This has been a difficult decision about which name I want to use to call you. I call you Quan, so I'm going to use that name tonight. I first encountered Gazpacho Agridulce in 2015 when the book came out. A friend had sent a photograph to me from a bookstore in Madrid, and I ordered the book immediately and had it sent to me as fast as possible in New York. At the time, I was writing a dissertation that studied representations of Chinese migrants and their descendants living in Spain. And that's what a lot of my research has focused on since that time. Up until that point, the representations that I had encountered of Chinese and Chinese descendant people were generally racist, insensitive, and often positioned Chinese communities as the narrative's villains or the object of ridicule. In contemporary Spain, public discourse surrounding Chinese migration is plagued by hyperbolic stereotypes and urban legends which serve to dehumanize Chinese and Chinese descendant communities. Many of these stereotypes, such as the notion that all Chinese migrants are connected with the mafia, for example, are rooted in the yellow peril of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Some ideas that you might be familiar with. So this is an image from a magazine published in the Philippines that is talking about the cuestión palpitante, que es la inmigración china en Filipinas. And a lot of these ideas are related to kind of international tropes. So when I'm asked about how I became interested in studying representations of Spain's Chinese community, I often cite as the genesis of my research a 2010 issue of 20 Minutos. So this is a free newspaper that is distributed on the street during rush hour. And one morning in 2010, I was reading the newspaper on a bus in Madrid, and on the front page, I saw this image which caught my attention. It's a photograph of a business owner standing behind the bar at his Mesón Madrileño, accompanied by an article that read El boom chino llega incluso a los bares de tapas. The article describes how Chinese migrants empezaron con los restaurantes chinos, después continuaron con las tiendas de ultramarinos, ahora ya tienen grandes distribuidoras, peluquerías y hasta las típicas tascas de toda la vida. Los chinos, el colectivo de inmigrantes más silencioso, es también la más dinámica a la hora de montar empresas. So this article signals the visibility of the Chinese community in everyday life and the community's entrepreneurship, which is a unique aspect of this sort of migration. Fine, but if you read between the lines, what the article is really saying is that this Chinese-owned business and others like it are slowly taking over. And moreover, the article suggests that by opening a kind of traditional Tasca-style restaurant, so you can see there's jamón, tortilla, that the Chinese business owners are crossing into cultural territory where they don't belong. So in other words, this article draws a proverbial line in the sand to suggest that the bar's owners, Chineseness and Spanishness are mutually exclusive categories. So let me just go back because I wanted to show a few of the sorts of texts that I was encountering. So here are some examples of film and television that had Chinese characters. Tapas, Física o Química, a very popular primetime television show about high school students, and even Iñárritu's Beautiful, which I think we might not consider as a text that, or we might consider it to be a text that intends to be more culturally sensitive, but I think that it also relies on a lot of these tropes that are really rooted in this yellow peril logic. And then examples of literature, La Ciudad Feliz, Sociedad Negra, and Laberinto de Mentiras. Both of those novels are like crime fiction that follow generic standards or genre standards. And then popular culture and material culture, we have advertisements from the late 1940s for Fu Manchu, screening, other kinds of popular or kiosco fiction and material cultures, advertising for the flan chino mandarin brand of flan. So the kind of binary that is alluded to in that 20 Minutos article that separates the business owner's Chineseness from their Spanishness is the very kind of binary that Quan's work so expertly challenges. So she tells us stories about her own lived experience and in this way undermines the fallacies that are far too commonplace and have gone unchallenged for decades. Her work demonstrates how the personal is already always political. So Jordana already mentioned this, but I really cannot overstate how groundbreaking Gazpacho Agridulce was at the time of its publication, which is now almost a decade ago, and she's done so much more work in the intervening years. I would say that Quan's interventions have shaped the broader societal conversation about race and identity in Spain. Her work has contributed enormously to destabilizing racist representations of Spain's Asian diasporas. So here we have some of your books. I know that there's one children's book that I haven't included here, but I think for today's presentation, these are the ones that I'd like to highlight. She's also a pioneer in what we might think of as a boom in anti-racist writing in Spain, and this is a term that I'm borrowing from Julia Chang. She spoke about this at a roundtable that we did at Cornell during Quan's residency there. And so, like Quan, writers such as Desiree Bella Lobede, who will be visiting, and I highly recommend that you return for that conversation, Ruben Bermudez, Chenta Sai, who will also be visiting, and I'm very excited to attend that as well, Lucia Mbomio Rubio, Moja Gerehu, and Paloma Chen, have published work that draws on their personal experiences and challenges conventional ways of thinking about Spain as a place where race is not a major social or political issue. And so I think we often encounter that sort of narrative or framing that race is something that happens elsewhere. And sometimes it might spill over into Spanish society, but usually it's an issue that's coming from somewhere else. And I think Quan's work really demonstrates how that is not the case and kind of deconstructing some of these ideas we have around racialized communities is something that needs to happen sort of from the ground up. In my own personal trajectory, Gazpacho Agridulce in particular has impacted my professional life more than any other of the cultural texts I studied. As I mentioned, when I was doing this work, it was like there weren't any texts that had been published by major publishers that offered a counter narrative to the things that I was encountering. You might be able to find sort of more alternative, small little examples of popular culture, independent artists working, but nothing at this scale. In the field of Iberian cultural studies, Juan's work, like that of other racialized cultural producers in Spain, is really transforming the way that we teach at many U.S. colleges and universities. So I know a lot of my colleagues are teaching your work, they're teaching the work of these authors, and I think it's changing not only the way that we do research, but also the way that we are teaching Iberian cultural studies. And indeed, Juan's appointment as KJCC chair, or KJC chair, is evident of this shift in our field. It is the beginning of an exciting, inspiring, and long overdue change. So one aspect of Juan's work that I want to talk about a little bit more in detail that runs throughout the various media that she works in, and that's going to be one of the themes of our conversation today. She works in graphic narrative forms, essay, audio, is her use of humor. So since the conception of her illustrative work as a Tumblr account, so some of you may not be familiar with that. It was originally a Tumblr back in the days when Tumblr was the place to be. Juan's wit and humor have been identifying characteristics of her work, and it's also one of the great pleasures of spending time with her, which I'm sure you're all learning during her residency here at NYU. Humor is a powerful, if volatile, tool for social commentary. It can be very slippery. Historically and in the contemporary era, humor often veils racist sentiment, even if it claims, quote unquote, no bad intentions. So when we peek behind the surface, comedy often reveals social anxieties, fears, and prejudices. Following Lisa Lo's foundational theorization of the Asian immigrant in the US as a screen on which, and I quote, the nation projects a series of condensed, complicated anxieties, I contend that the preoccupation with Chinese migration and Chinese economic investment in contemporary Spain reveals angst around its own economic and cultural capital. So some examples of that: Perdiendo el Este, a 2017 film, the sequel to the more successful Perdiendo el Norte, which was on Netflix for a brief time, or, well, it's gone now, but it was there, follows the protagonist Braulio on his misadventures in Hong Kong. And these misadventures are mirrored by his father's anxiety about and miscommunication with the Chinese proprietors of a bazaar that has moved in across the street from his hardware store. So he feels very threatened by them. And in 2017, the same year, the annual Programa Especial de Nochevieja con José Mota was titled Bienvenido, Mr. Wanda, a nod to Berlanga's Bienvenido, Mr. Marshall. And the film features Jose Mota playing a variety of figures from both ends of the political spectrum as they band together to impress a Chinese billionaire who has pledged a 2 billion euro investment in a yet unnamed European country. So they're trying to win that bid. And the Marshall in Berlanga's title is replaced with Wanda, which is a reference to Dalian Wanda, the real estate company owned by the Chinese mogul Wang Jianlin, that purchased this iconic Edificio España in 2013 and has since sold it, but that also was a whole kind of commotion about patrimonio cultural, or cultural heritage. So like, how could a Chinese investor own this building that is so iconic? Both of these films from 2017 reveal anxieties about Spain's position in the global economy while simultaneously shoring up white supremacy through comedy that draws on over a century of the yellow peril discourse that I referenced earlier. And one of the most glaring examples is the weaponization of humor on El Hormiguero, which is a very popular kind of late night show hosted by Pablo Motos. It airs on Antena 3. And the same year, in 2017, Yi Bing was announced as an addition to the program's lineup, and she was advertised as explaining aspects of quote-unquote Chinese culture as Motos and his guests struggled to pronounce Chinese words and guffaw at the ingenuity of contraptions like a portable toilet seat. The program also includes segments such as El Precio Justo, hosted by two puppets dressed in, again, quote-unquote Chinese costumes, and the particularly offensive Oída Cotina, in which Chinese guests sing Spanish ballads and viewers are encouraged to laugh at their pronunciation. So Quan has responded publicly to El Hormiguero's racist humor on a number of occasions, in print, on her social media, including this article published in January 2020 titled Humor y Raza, in which she interrogates the notion of broma sin mala intención, to use her words, noting that no es solo esta sección de Hormiguero, la representación de los chinos y la cultura china en España en medios nacionales suele ser del mismo estilo. So while ethnic humor has a long tradition of serving as resistance when it comes from a racialized community, and this has been theorized by scholars such as John Lowe and David Galata, racist humor has received much less attention. And I think that's because it's sometimes really difficult to kind of get a grasp on and explain why it's so problematic, even though when you encounter it, you often know that it is. The fine line between humor and offense can be a difficult one to parse, and Quan has also talked about los ofendiditos, this kind of rebuttal that sometimes come from the other side of saying, oh, it's just a joke, you don't have to get so offended. And scholars note that, and I'm citing an article by Grafer and Doss here, what remains crucial is whether humor kicks socially upward or socially downward. And in an interview with Raquel Vega Duran, published in Consecuencias, Quan explains, mi percepción es que como mujer racializada tengo que dar más e imponer más para que la gente no me tome por un chiste, porque yo he sido chiste también para medios de comunicación. Y sobre todo es problemático por mi utilización del humor, pues para mí el humor no es un fin, sino un medio. Sin embargo, hay una tensión ahí, porque lo que cuento es serio, y el lector se va a reír, pero luego le va a doler, porque lo que cuento duele. Quan's humor invites us to reflect and often demands that we reconsider perceptions and presumptions we have held for so long that they seem natural and inevitable, even when they are not. So the last part of the intervention that I'd like today, before passing the mic to Juan, is to mention the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, which may seem like it was a long time ago, and yet this is just barely in our rearview mirror. It presented an opportunity for the specter of yellow peril to rear its ugly head once more. I think we all know that. If you were living in New York City, if you were living really anywhere in the Western world, I'm sure you were aware of that. The pandemic hit Spain hard and early, and by February 2020, Spain had become one epicenter of what would soon be classified as a global pandemic. The media's sustained focus on the strain's origin in China has fueled anti-Asian racism and violence on a global scale, including in Spain. On her Instagram feed, Quan used the hashtag together with an image of herself holding a poster reading "No tengo el coronavirus," and you can see she uses the hashtag there, "No soy un virus," outside of the Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores in Madrid. And so she was one of a number of artists, activists, and other collectives of Asian descent that were using the hashtag in a number of different kinds of public actions, which we don't have time to look at today, but I would be happy to discuss it with you more in the Q&A if you're interested. So in their volume, hashtag activism, Jackson, Bailey, and Foucault-Wells underscore the importance of the digital labor of raced and gendered counterpublics. And in the book, they argue that groups historically excluded from what they call elite media spaces have repurposed digital platforms like Twitter, RIP, which in the book, they make their focus. So They talk mostly about Twitter, but I think that their theories can be extended to think about other kinds of social media platforms. They say that groups historically excluded from these elite media spaces have used digital platforms, quote, to make identity-based cultural and political demands, and in doing so have forever changed national consciousness. They contend that hashtags can build diverse networks of dissent, build cultural and political knowledge, and ultimately influence the mainstream public sphere. So I think that the No Soy un Virus hashtag works in this way. And what I want to emphasize is this idea of networks of dissent, which is kind of part of their central thesis. So the hashtag reinforces a tangible sense of community within, in this case, the Chinese diaspora, particularly among younger generations that are using social media platforms. It connects individuals with local organizers and a broader network of activists and organizations abroad. So in this way, hashtags like No Soy un Virus and the digital platforms that host them can facilitate local and transnational networks of dissent. Quan continues to use her social media presence as a tool to create networks of dissent, and this is something I would like to talk about more in the Q&A, but I do want to point out one example from summer of 2020 when she posted this poll on Instagram, which again, I think you can really see her humor coming through here because it's very tongue-in-cheek while also being very serious. So she asks her followers to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, from least to most racist, and then ask participants to explain their answer. And so what's interesting is that most, and she could tell us more about this as well, most people rated themselves obviously on the very low end of the spectrum, like, okay, maybe I'll admit to like a 2 because no one's perfect. And then why did you rate yourself this way on the scale? And often it's like, well, you know, I'm not very racist, but I see things happen, or I hear things, or I notice things. And so that resulted in the No va conmigoísmo, lo que aprendí preguntando a españoles sobre el racismo in the column Verne de El País. So it's this idea that's like, it's out there, it's happening, but it's somebody else. You know, it's really terrible that that happens. It's such a shame, but I'm not the one that's participating in it. And this work on her social media platform later developed into the graphic essay, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. I love all of her books, but this one I find to be really inspiring. Gente de aquí, gente de allí, which was released in November 2020. It's no understatement to say that Quan's work is making a huge impact on conversations about race and identity in Spain and probably in the US as well. We have her here, and so we can also take advantage of her knowledge and insight. She continues to challenge the status quo with incisiveness and humor. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with her and with my colleague Wan today. Thank you.
So I would also like to begin by extending my sincerest thanks to Jordana for inviting us to participate in this event today, with additional thanks to Marina, Juan Manuel, and Luis for their coordinating efforts. It is an enormous pleasure to be here, much like Mary Kate said, sharing the stage with two friends whose work I also admire greatly. And like Mary Kate, I also have this debate whether to say Chen or Quan, but I will also default to the Spanish pronunciation, and we can talk about that during the discussion. In January of 2017, I attended a panel titled Asian Iberia at the annual convention of the Modern Language Association. Mary Kate, whom I had not yet met, was one of the panelists, and she gave a fascinating presentation on how members of the Chinese diasporic community in Spain negotiated their ethnic identities, including a discussion of Quan's graphic novel Gazpacho Agridulce. Spanish literary and cultural studies have traditionally focused on the work of white authors, artists, and filmmakers, particularly within my subfield of 19th century studies. As an Asian American scholar who graduated from a fairly traditional institution, I was beyond thrilled to discover Spanish cultural producers that looked like me. When I finally got my hands on Gazpacho Agridulce and its sequel, Andaluchinas por el Mundo, I devoured Quan's story, a story about growing up between two cultures and trying to drown out all the voices criticizing her as simultaneously too Chinese or too Spanish and not Chinese or not Spanish enough. I loved Quan's illustrations of the indomitable Mama Joe, there she is, who reminded me of my own Mama Tang. I loved the humor with which Quan explored questions of race and racism. As Adrián Collado notes, humor, this is a quote, humor in Quan's text aims to heal, never hurt, end quote. But most of all, I loved that Quan was telling a story that was familiar to me, albeit within a Spanish rather than an American context. Actually, that Spanish context was also familiar to me, as I had spent a year working at a high school in Madrid, where the school secretary had asked me on a daily basis what things were like in my country, by which she meant China, even though I had repeatedly explained that I was in fact American and that my parents were from Taiwan. Quan's work, which spoke to so many of my own experiences, was a revelation for me. So I did what any fangirl born in the 80s would do. I looked up Quan's email address and I wrote to her. No DMs, I'm too old school for that. I told her that I was a professor of Spanish cultural studies and that I was an admirer of her work, but above all, that I was the daughter of Asian immigrants to the United States and that her stories had resonated with me deeply. I fervently hoped that this personal connection would compel Quan to respond, but I also suspected that a successful graphic novelist with as many fans as Quan had would not likely reply to all the random emails that she received. I sent my message with the utmost optimism, but with zero expectations. And then, miraculously, Quan replied. In the fall of 2018, in the midst of a research trip to examine 19th century periodicals at the Spanish National Library, I met Quan Zhou for a drink in Madrid. Two important things grew out of this initial meeting. First of all, the start of a friendship cemented by our shared teenage obsession with Dao Mingsi, the protagonist of the 2001 Taiwanese drama Meteor Garden, which I recommend, and the idea to bring Quan stateside for a series of visits across a smattering of East Coast college campuses. The following fall, in 2019, I organized Quan's first college-speaking tour. It included stops at Bates College, Bryn Mawr College, Rutgers University, and Boston College, where we were also joined by Mary Kate. And that is the poster that my graphic designer husband designed with some help from Quan's artistry. Each stop along Quan's itinerary was chosen for its relative geographical proximity to Boston College and the enthusiastic collaboration of my colleagues at these institutions. David George at Bates, Rosie Song at Bryn Mawr, who's now at Durham University in the UK, and Yoon-Soo Kim at Rutgers. To no one's surprise, the tour was a huge success. Everywhere Quan spoke, students were excited to meet a vibrant writer and illustrator from the contemporary cultural scene, and appreciated that Quan brought a different perspective to discussions of Spanish identity. When Quan came to Boston College, I had just taught her graphic novels, Gazpacho Agridulce and Andalucinas por el Mundo, in an undergraduate course titled Warrior Woman of Spain. From the self-described radical feminism of 19th century author Emilia Pardo Bazán to the wartime rhetoric of communist icon La Pasionaria, the course was filled with the words and works of women who had fought, at times literally, for equality and justice. Quan may not have borne any arms, but she is certainly a standard-bearer in the quest for increased representation of racial diversity in Spain. Not only is she a woman of color, granting visibility to a marginalized ethnic minority within Spain, but she has done so through a genre that has only recently garnered an air of respectability amongst Spanish cultural critics. This intersectionality of her identity as a woman, as the daughter of Chinese immigrants, and as a graphic novelist means that she has had to fight for recognition at every turn. As a woman of Asian descent, Quan resists the fetishized stereotype of silent subservience. As a female writer and illustrator, Quan gained entry into what remains a male-dominated artistic and literary field, although thankfully this imbalance is diminishing. And as a graphic novelist belonging to the Chinese diaspora, Quan was the first bicultural comics creator to depict the experiences of migrants and their descendants within Spanish society. Her most recent work, La Agridulce Vida, is peppered with short histories of the Chinatowns to which Quan traveled. So she also weaves in this larger diasporic story along with her personal story. In each of these roles, then, Quan is a true woman warrior. Echoing the sentiments of other anti-racist Spanish artists, such as the author Desiree Belalovere, who, as we know, will be coming here, and the musician Chenta Tsaiseng, who will also be coming here. Quite the lineup we have this spring. Quan has noted that her mere presence within the public sphere constitutes a kind of activism. But it is not just Quan's visibility that is groundbreaking. She constantly employs both verbal and visual arts to combat sexism, racism, and xenophobia. Her trio of graphic novels, for instance, are anchored in her own lived experiences, as well as those of her two sisters, and often hinge upon the Zhou sisters' relationship with their traditional Chinese mother. Quan's father and brother, it is often noted, are peripheral to the stories that she tells. Notably, each of the Zhou women is depicted as relatable, three-dimensional individual with her own hopes, dreams, and fears, implicitly refuting the omnipresent stereotypes of Asian femininity as either submissive lotus flower or dangerous dragon lady. This is particularly groundbreaking within a Spanish context, which until Quan started writing, lacked any female authors of Asian descent. Unlike in the US, where Asian American women could look to Maxine Hong Kingston in the 70s, Amy Tan in the 90s, and a plethora of successful authors today, like Jhumpa Lahiri, Celeste Ng, Minjin Lee, just to name a couple, Quan's graphic novels are at the vanguard of a more nuanced portrayal of Asian and especially Chinese diasporic femininity in Spain. Nevertheless, Quan's art and activism extends beyond any particular ethnic or racial group. This is made clear in her Instagram collaborations with different feminist and/or anti-racist NGOs. In one example, Quan's melding of text and graphics draws attention to the mental health struggles of migrant women. In another, she spreads awareness of Spanish women's contributions to science via playful allusions to Star Wars. These posts showcase Quan's gift for pedagogical storytelling, a talent established in her graphic essay, also mentioned by Mary Kate, Gente de aquí, gente de allí, which she describes as a work of pop sociology. Here, Quan employs her trademark humor and comic-style illustrations to break down concepts like implicit bias for audiences of novices, disarming any potentially hostile or defensive readers. This ability to explain, educate, and incite self-reflection is Quan's superpower, and it is what makes her an ideal artivist. Residing, in the words of playwright, author, and activist V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, where edges are pushed, imagination is freed, and a new language emerges altogether.
Oh my God. I mean, please see yourself with the eyes that your colleagues or friends see you, because estoy como very emotional now. Very, very emotional. So I also don't know how to call myself. I mean, in Qingdianhua, which is the dialect that my family speak, is not Chuan, not Quan, it's Ayue. So my family also calls me Ayue. And my partner here loves to call me Ayue because he finds it very amusing how my mom starts all the audio in WhatsApp, Ayue, Ayue, Ayue. So she repeats my name all the time. I want to continue with thanking everybody first to be here in this place. Everybody told me that in the city there is a lot of stuff to do. I know. I feel FOMO every day for staying at home and sleeping because there's so many important things to do and many of them free. So it's like, yeah, you know. I want to also thank Jordana, my big academic sister, and I consider you now for being the chair this year, to Marina, to Juan Manuel, to Sarah, to all the team that has welcomed me here with open arms. So I'm very, very happy. Ay, emocionada. So I want to start a little bit before, because you all guys discovered me when I already published, but I want to tell a little bit of the background of where I come from. So I come from a pueblo called Pueblo. It used to be a village. Now it's a super expensive coastline city for rich people, but it used to be a village, very cheap one. And we were the second Chinese family in that village. So I had nobody to play with, nobody to talk with, because the other Chinese family had another restaurant. So we were like kind of enemies, no? So so I have another Chinese friends. They were my family, and I knew them when we were my cousins when we were like 14 or 15. So before them, it was the notion of what a Chinese was kind of unknown to me. So that's kind of my background of being like the only person of color in our class, me and my sister. And then I don't have any academic background towards storytelling, not public humanities. I'm doing public humanities, not storytelling. I'm writing the scripts. I mean, I have no academic background of what I do, but I do it with a lot of passion. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story. It's a tiny one. I think that story tells a lot about me. So I think I was 4 years old or maybe 5, but I wasn't going to school yet. So I was walking with my mom, and I was counting the leaves because there was a bush over there. And at that time, I just knew how to count to 20, and that was it. But I knew there had to be something more. Like, why stopping in 20? But I haven't started school yet, so I thought if I count until 20, maybe the next thing will magically appear. If I put faith, if I put, I don't know, will, it will come. So I started counting like 20. Well, if it's 11, when it's Spanish, it's 11, no? But 12, 12, 13, no? Then you just add the 4, 5, 6. So I arrived to 29, and I was like, damn it, I don't know the word. But then the concept was there, so I just needed to go to school, and they teach me that the next thing was a number, and the number was 30. I just needed to educate myself. Well, comic was the same. I didn't study. I was just like, I have a story to tell. I have something. I have some memories that I wanna share with people. So even though I didn't study comic, it might magically appear when I start drawing. And so I didn't quite think much about that. So I think these are my Tumblr. The first comics, they're short strips. Oh, I curse word. I'm sorry if anybody feel offended. This had 10 years, more than 10 years old, because I started in 2014. I was 23 year old at that time. So I didn't have any notion of what anti-racism or what rationale behind, because I know people in academia, you love rationale behind rationale. I had no rationale. I had just feeling. I had a lot of feelings. So I just put it there. And short strips are quite easy to make. Like you find a punchline and you do it, no? Like maybe the punchline was the kick in the balls, or how my mom said to me when I was suffering bullying, because I didn't know that was bullying. I just thought that people were nasty and that's it, no? And so when I did that, I really did that. So the next Spanish guy who was bullying me, I told him, Españolito, Españolito. And he wasn't offended. So he was like, that's weird. But because I was angry, but I didn't know the racial dynamic or racial power that was happening in that time. I was just angry because I'm a person that had a lot of feelings. So then I decided to do, well, gazpacho agridulce is the one on the top behind, but well, you get the idea because I just shared with you before. So it started to get a little bit more complicated because people surround me. There were writers, there were journalists, and I remember this woman telling me, ¿cuál es el discurso de este libro? So what is this discourse? ¿Es discurso? Well, what's the message that you want to send? And I was like, what message? ¿Qué mensaje? No? What do I want to share? I don't know. That's why I think when I published Gazpacho Agridulce, I almost instantly started to hate it because people were like, oh, you don't draw. What is this about? Or you are just talking about Chinese thing. Like, like I needed to hide to be Chinese or something. And I think here is being discussed so much, like you don't want to be an Asian artist, like you want to be just an artist, or how universality it seems just being for white people, no? That is something that we also discuss in Spain. Like universality, when you are out of fiction, comes from a white female. She can talk about universal love, but the love I talk maybe is just, I don't know, a racial fetishization, or maybe your niche kind of view, no? And these days I think in that my universality can also be universal. Excuse me the redundancia, no? English is not my first language. So, um, and also with Gazpacho that I hated but then started to love so much, it was like so honest. Like it was a compilation of memories that my sister and me, we do all remember. And because I wanted to mention also why humor, because I've been also in another interviews with other scholars and university and academics, and they're very like not how do I say that? They ask me, what's your perception of respect about the humor, no? And humor and comic, because one say a successful graphic novelist. I was like, no, in Spain, comic is not glamorous. I mean, I now, a fact, I would put my hand on the fire to say that if I were, instead of a graphic novel, if I had written a 300 pages long, boring essay that nobody read, I would have so much more respect. But lately, I don't know. I get thinking about how that is clasista, no? Classicist. I mean, I chose comic because it was accessible and it was cheap. Maybe if I was also a superstar filmmaker, I would have much more respect. I don't know, but the perception of comic that has for the journalists or for the radio people or for the TV people or for Spanish mainstream people, they say, "Oh, tú haces dibujitos, like you made small drawings," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm a storyteller." But the upside, the downside, that's the downside, no? But the upside is like it's very accessible, and I think that's what public humanities do, being accessible to the people. And with that, I found that humor can be a very powerful tool in a sense that you can make people feel good, like it stays with your body, the laugh, like when you laugh so much that you barriga your barriga hurts and you're like this, it hurts. And it's not my problem if you don't like to laugh, but I do love to laugh, and I'm a cheerful person. So I think that's why my few books, my first 3 books, are in a cheerful tone. But it doesn't mean that I need to stay in that tone, in that cheerful, always being happy or making jokes tone. Oh, I mean, this is another one from my Tumblr. Like, people are really surprised that I speak with no accent. So when I grab the phone and they discover that I'm Chinese, they're like, wow, just like me. And here in New York, they are very surprised that I speak Spanish from Spain with no accent. So they're like, ¿de dónde España? ¿De dónde? O sea, España de España, no? So I'm always a foreigner for some reason. I mean, you get used to it. I mean, it's kind of nice, not like you are never a local, so maybe people don't expect much from you. So it's kind of nice too. So these were like Tumblr and my first Tumblr, and then I jumped really fast to the Spanish national newspaper. I always tell this because I just published like 3 vignettes, and they called me from the newspaper. And again, at the moment, I didn't have the consciousness of how deep my work was going to be, like zero. And I was talking to some of you that I met today that you teach with my books, and being an artist, especially a comic artist, is a very lonely job. Like, you are staying in your home and you draw, and then your arm hurts, and then your back hurts, and then you just, you have a book, but you don't know how people read it and how they use it. So for me, it's very, very good. Bueno, good. I don't. Awesome, amazing. O sea, todo lo bueno, like getting to know you and how the book this thing that was made in privacy. The first book I didn't show it even to my sister. So my small sister was like, "Why did you put this on the comic?" Because there was a vignette that she killed some hamster. So she was like, "Why are you putting this? It's already published." So she was laughing and crying at the same time. But my work doesn't end on comics. I have started being more pictorial again. So these are paintings of my parents. It's published in Esferas here in NYU. And I didn't draw the full face like on purpose because in Spanish media, we always portray immigration such as somebody that need help or somebody that is a criminal. So you are in the two polarized side, or very good or very bad. So they don't give us any agency to my parents, or migrant people, people of color have desire, have mundane desire, have agency, want to buy clothes, have lust, have stuff. So I wanted to show quotidianity. Do you say like everyday life? Everyday life, because that was the first year that my parents go to the beach because they used to be really hardworking, and my mom was really concerned for her to be tan because Chinese people like to be pale, and she was like, if I put like a hat, I can enjoy the beach, and I cannot get my face is still pale. So it was a really nice, quiet summer, and I decided to explore more different ways to communicate and to portray and to show the people that we lived. And we live, y ya está. O sea, that's it. We live, and maybe we don't have to have another further expression or meaning or whatever, no? So I like the text that we read in class about Black excellence, no? Sometimes we just need to be. Y that's it. Y ya está. So, and today, the talk, we also in the title there is AI, no? And you will be asking, what's AI about? Here, how many of you speak Spanish? Sorry. Well, todos. Everybody. So this is my latest job or work. You can scan it and save it for later. It's not yet released, but I thought this was going to be a little bit more private, but you can have a little bit of advance. I'm not going to spoil everything so you can enjoy, because it's a digital exhibition with an audio guide. The audio guide, of course, is me, the narrator, but I'm going to let you enjoy. There's a lot of historical facts also from the village that my family comes in China, which is Qingtian. Qingtian is so unknown that if you are not from Zhejiang region, when I go to Beijing and people ask me, where are your family from? I say Qingtian, they don't know where it is. So it's that unknown, but 80% of the Qingtian migrants are in Europe, and half of the population of Qingtian, which is 500,000, have migrated. So 250,000, they are out, and most of them are in Europe. So this is quite unknown. And because I was an independent researcher and artist, it was really, really hard for me to find my own history. So I ChatGPT, all this AI thing. I've been playing a lot with different AIs. I'm just gonna say that this portrait was made by AI. I just put my face on it, and you can take a look later about the whole piece in Linaje, no? But I did a huge research in Chinese with ChatGPT helping me because I cannot read Chinese. So it was a huge language lab. Like I cannot read, I cannot see. So looking for something in Baidu, the Chinese Google, no, the Chinese Finder, was quite difficult. And reading every piece, finding sources, it was muy difícil. O sea, muy difícil, especially if you are independent. Now that I'm here, I have this wonderful library, Bob's. I have wonderful people to ask to, but back then I was in my house in a village because I moved to another village of 3,000 people, 3,000 habitantes, sola. It was very difficult research to make. So I found out that I love analogic things such as paper, brush, acrylic paintings. I love it. And I love the feeling of a book, but AI is kind of disrupting this scene. Do you guys know how inteligencia general artificial generativa works? Do you know how it works? Sí, bueno, I'm just going because I interviewed a researcher. He works now in MIT. He's doing this thing because in arts is a very difficult topic to discuss about. So I was like, am I going to be jobless? Is the AI really going to steal my job? Because I was doing some experiment with AI and it had a lot of biases and racial biases, patriarchal biases, and the results were really nasty. And I'm like, okay, what is this happening? So he basically told me that this model universal, no, that is like a bank, a data bank that you can have all collected in there, and then the AI that we know is all the outside models that extract the information. So you need to train not the universal information back, but how do you extract that information? And he also told me that about the possibility of training your own in your computer with no access to internet, so you will have your personal digital assistant. That also costs a lot of money. But as an artist, I was really worried about this, but then this is happening, this is changing whether we want it or not. So how do we prepare? So I just because I'm not an expert on AI, I just use it and try to see how are the ethical things of using it, how navigating this, how will be this used for good instead of stealing things, instead of the use for bad. I found it really helpful for linaje, no? So please scan it and listen to it and let me know your thoughts about linaje. And I think, and the podcast, I forgot about the podcast. You see, I talk a lot, but the podcast also started because I've been mistreated a lot in a lot of media, like radio shows, TV, newspaper, and I don't want to keep complaining because, hello, I'm here right now. My mom kept telling me today, please bring photos because I want to see you in the auditorium. But it was a long journey. I've been working more than 10 years, and then there's always a journalist or somebody that was putting Oriental music when they're interviewing me, or saying, what was one? I had one interviewed the worst of the worst that was sexist and racist. So it was because of the Chinese New Year, and this guy was saying to me, oh, your voice sounds really sexy. Why the Chinese New Year doesn't have a camel? Something like that. And I was like, I'm here to talk about otras cosas. And you have a voice of a perv. I say that on online radio. So I started my podcast because when somebody did their job like average, like just good, they're just not the nicest interview or the most interesting, but they were just good people. So I was feeling tremendously grateful, like, thank you for not treating me like garbage. So I thought that was not normal, no? That I should be expecting more. I want an interesting conversation. I want an interesting interview. I want that this encounter is interesting for me too, not you putting a badge that we are inclusive and now we have the Chinese lady. So I created my podcast, and I keep telling the people that I invite my friends because after talking to them, I find them really interesting and they become my friends. I'm a very friendly person too, right? But Movida Varias, you will see that I say a lot of curse words. It's kind of, I'm the host, and we are going to feel good, and most of the people that I invite are minority in one or another way. But then Movida Varia jumped to the theater. So this was very nice because Giselle Rosa, she has also another podcast. She's based in Spain, but she's Afro-Venezuelan. So she was also talking how their identity was born, like they needed to develop their own code, their own language, their own style, and not keep copying the United States styles. No, it's something that it keep happening that because you guys here have so much exposure, we keep importing. Like, no filter. Y ya está. So we have this, this is just a joke. We were drinking beers, and because our Spanish were different, I was like, yeah, let's do this game. ¿Qué significa pacuso? No? Do you guys want to play? What do you think pacuso means? Is there any Venezuelan in the room? Venezuelan doesn't count. You cannot answer. So pacuso means nothing, like or whatever. Pacuso means patidifuso, like I'm surprised in Venezuelan. Or pacuso can means stinky, you know, because of the word game pata, culo, y sobaco, which means feet, ass, and pit, no armpit. Anybody want to say? Well, the first one, who says that means nothing? Who says that means surprise, patidifuso? And who says that means smelly? See, it means smelly. Well, it was a very fun way to be in an auditorium, to be in a theater, to be with people, to have fun. And our audience were mainly white. So it has another power dynamic. We are here, but we are teaching you and we are laughing together. And maybe we can do some like another more risky jobs that I will not do here because we have an academic audience. But I think, and I will stop there to start the conversation, that these different medias help me to reach a broader audience, broad as in territorial, because people read me or reach me from, here from New York, from Shanghai, from, I don't know, many different places that I had no access before internet. And that's a fact. I think if internet or blog or social media didn't exist, I wouldn't be here today. Because I could have a critical mass, the people that think with me or give me answers to whatever I share, because I'm on internet. And I don't have that many followers in Instagram, just 66,000, not poquito. But I get sometimes work as an I hate this word, influencer, but because influencer, but at least when we are like content with the bare minimum, at least I'm the influencer instead of another famous same time of lady. And I think that will be, we can jump into the questions. Did I talk long? No.
So I think what we're going to do is Wan and Mary Kate are going to talk a couple minutes, maybe like 10 minutes or so, because I know they raised a lot of interesting things that they want to kind of process together. And then we're going to have some time for public Q&A.
I think that we decided that we were going to have an abbreviated discussion here so that members of the audience could have time to ask questions, because surely you have many more interesting questions. So go for it, Mary Kate.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have a whole list here, but again, I won't be selfish, and we can keep it brief. So I think maybe starting with where you ended, one of the things that I'm interested in asking you about is your move into more audio formats. Mm-hmm. So many of us that know your work think of you as a visual artist. Yeah. So you're a storyteller. You talked about the way you use comics, and you've been increasingly incorporating audio into your work. So Movies Varias, the podcast, and then also the digital exhibition that you shared with us, Linaje. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about why you think that audio is a compelling medium in addition to the visual.
I think I always love to speak. Siempre me ha gustado hablar. That's one thing. So I also have another theory that because I think I'm a curious person, but my passions always find me before I find them. Like, I'm very curious. I want to dig into this. I dig into that. So because I was a very visible person and I got collaboration on different national radio shows in Spain, my producer, Martin from Planeta Media, he offered me to do a podcast. So at first, I didn't know so much about this, about how a podcast is made, what's the structure. I had no structure. And I always joke about how Martin say, let's keep it short. We have 20 minutes and that's it. and not a single episode has 20 minutes. Like, we could just keep talking because the people I bring is interesting. We talk about, for example, how there is lesbian Muslims in Spain. That was very shocking. And how do you know MENA? MENA in Spanish is menor extranjero no acompañado, which is a single, not an unaccompanied minor, no? You have that here. And there's this guy who was working with unaccompanied minor. So, and then we also talk about a lot of different things. So the conversation just kept going. But then, because I didn't listen to podcasts, it happened the same with comic. I didn't read comic after I started publishing. So imagine the gap. I didn't hear or what I wasn't listening any podcast until I started to publish my podcast. So it was kind of reverse engineer, no? So now I'm publishing podcast, I should know what is out there, no? And then I found that it was a very powerful storytelling tool. But I hate hearing my voice. So that is it's a big handicap, because then I'm like, I need to see how my tones goes. I need to see what's the tone for this. You will see that I'm very lively, but in Linaje the tone is very different. So I'm a storyteller. I'm a detached person. I mean, why keep just comic? I love doing comics. I really do. But then there's a whole universe that can explain, like acrylic paintings, oil paintings, exhibition. Maybe tomorrow I will do, I don't know, performance, or maybe not. I don't know. But I think it's been enriching my universe, my creator universe.
It's hard picking one question. But I'll ask my favorite question too, because it's personally motivated. Because I talked about how I really wanted to meet you because I felt an immediate connection with what you had written, right? And so I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about the kind of affinity or connection you might have felt, or kinship, a sense of kinship, right, with other diasporic communities, right? So most obviously, like other Chinese diaspora, like other parts of the Chinese diaspora, like, you know, Chinese Americans or Canadians, because you talk about it in La Dolce Vita, but also other diasporic communities, right? Like, is there something that makes you feel this sense of kinship with other people that belong to larger communities, but they're the minority in the society where they live?
I think the kinship is feeling like you were always a foreigner. Like, I used to think that I could separate numerically my identity. I used to, because Spanish people keep asking me, how do you feel, more Spanish or more Chinese? So I was like, is this mathematics? I need to put, well, if I was born in Spain, I was raised in Spain, and I must be 80% Spain, but since people keep calling me Chinese, I'm 80, 20, something. Then I discovered that identity are fluid, no? And then there is a tension between feeling from both sides and feeling for nowhere. Like, yeah, never, full Chinese and full Spanish, or not Chinese, neither Spanish. And I think I feel the kinship with the people that you do not need to over-explain. Like, I get you, and that's it. I do not need to teach you. I do not need that. We are communicating in the same level. We can understand the third culture kid jokes. I get you, no? It's that feeling that I get you. And that can happen with really different kind of minorities. Also, because Spain is a very small country compared to the States, and the people that, like me, we are in culture and we are activists, we all know each other. It's very small. So there is a symposium, and they are going to invite all the same people. Now there's a new generation coming, because I have now a certain age. I published it 10 years ago. And so there's people, for example, Paloma Chen, she was in high school. She was 15 when she was starting reading me. So I was the role model that I didn't have to her. And it's great. Now we are friends. But she could publish poetry, and having somebody to talk to, no? We having this kind of conversation about, hey, fight for your rights. Don't get this from that publisher because they need to pay you this and they need to pay you that. I have nobody to ask to. So I think that is good. Like indirectly or non-consciously, we created a community digitally, no? Now, not the child of internet. No, that's a good thing of the internet. And I met you, eh? I met you. I also met you, Mary Kate. So the hyperconnectivity well used, the technology well used, have many benefits. And otherwise, it has really dark side too. But I got the good taste of it.
I think if it's okay, we'll pass to the public. Does anyone have a question?
So you're a trailblazer, Quan, in so many aspects, and we cannot thank you enough for that. But I feel that there are some layers of your work and some layers of your trailblazing work that might seem easy now.
Oh, you think?
Now, but in the beginning, possibly not. And one of the layers that might tend to be overlooked is the fact that you're not only a woman, Sino-Spanish, but also Andalusian.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like to know, how was it in the beginning to overcome the stigma that comes from coming from the South?
You know, I always try to hide it in Madrid.
Yeah, of course.
Like, because people like, qué graciosa, eres andaluza. Pues yo conozco un chino en Cádiz, le conoce. And I was like, and it was very bad. And since we are now in family, I'm gonna talk another thing that, of course, I'm making public because people are racist with me with no shame. I have no shame spilling the secrets out. So I got an offer to make Gazpacho y Dulce, a TV series. They wanted to sell it to Netflix. So it was one of the biggest TV producer of Spain. And then they made it racist and xenophobic towards Chinese and towards Andalusian people. So they make my best friend character of Quan. They make it a otaku girl, a girl that likes manga and a lot of Oriental stuff, no, more than manga. And I was like, why do you do this? And then the object of love, it was an Andalusian man that smoked joints and played the guitar, asking for tips for the tourists. And I was like, you need to stereotype every part of me. Like, you are not content with the Chinese part, also the Andalusian. So it was very hard because you're always a joke. Like, a joke, because Madrid people and people from the north finds really amusing the Andalusian, and we joke about that too. Like, you think that we all siesta all the time, and then we wake up, ole, flamenco, and that's not it. We have very talented, serious, cultivated people in Andalusia, but bueno, the media, no, the Spanish media is very focused on Madrid and what happened in the capital. Is a longer story, but it was difficult being Andalusian. And they're always, no se te ha perdido el acento, tienes un deje, no? I know I hide it. I know that here in the States we have so many words that are really arose, no? Like the code switch. So we didn't know then. And the people are like, ¿y tu acento dónde está? You're another person. I didn't know I was code switching, no? But I was doing it.
Other questions?
Hi, so this is not a question, it's more of a comment. And I don't want to be the típica pesada del público que habla durante media hora. But so I want to say that this is like a dream for me. I'm Japanese Spanish. And even though I'm not part of the Japanese community in Spain, my experience was very, very similar to Quan's. And in the year 2000, I went to college in Spain, in Madrid, to Complutense, and I was the only Asian student in the whole campus. I believe Complutense is the largest university in Spain, and I was the only Asian student. And then when I started working at a newspaper, El Mundo, which at the time was the second largest newspaper in Spain, I was also the only Asian person in the newspaper. So my experience was I was always the Chinese, the Latina. They called me Latina because I don't know now, I'm not sure now, but back then there was no difference for the Spanish people between China,
There is still not.
Korea, Japan.
There is only difference with Filipino people. The rest are Chinese or Filipino. That's it.
There you go. So I was Latina, I was the Chinese. So, I always felt, even though I'm not Chinese, I felt very close to the very few Chinese people that were in Spain. And whenever I went to a Chinese store, you know, they have like delis in Spain, the Chinese immigrant people. So we looked at each other with complicity, you know, because we were the only Asians in the whole city. And so, yeah, I'm really happy to see Quan here today and representing an experience that I didn't even have the vocabulary to explain because there was no sensibility like there is now. There was no rhetoric like there is now. I had the same feelings, but I didn't know how to even start to explain to people. They would have never understood. I was the only one. I didn't have a community to support me. So I'm really happy that you're here.
Muchas gracias.
I think we probably have time for one last question.
Hi, I'm not Chinese, I'm Vietnamese, but I've experienced some very similar things in Spain. Yeah, I'm still allowed to ask a question, presumably. So you said that with the newer generation, obviously now there's more, I guess, more people for them to look up to that have sort of gone through this first process. And in the realm of like creative production and so on and so forth, there's always that first step of representing. So there's always like the representational aspect. And then later on with abundance, you have more space to be more critical and, you know, like have better interventions that are more profound than simply, I'm here. And I guess my question then is when you deal with some of these younger artists, writers, even academics, right? What do you feel are still some of like the major roadblocks for them? And whether or not you feel like the sort of progress we've talked about, because a decade is a long time, but it's really not that long. And so in your eyes, do you feel like Spain has made that much progress? In my own experience, I was like, oh, now there's like 3 pho restaurants in Madrid. That's wild, right? But it's not the same as to be recognized as a person, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your question. It's so good. No, we haven't advanced much. Nada. So in terms of maybe we are more visible, but visibility, what does it give you that people see you? I mean, we've been on the streets working. There were shops, there were restaurants, there were family working, but as you say, we are here. But that doesn't translate in better job. That doesn't translate in respect in media. That doesn't translate that the people that are in power are changing. They are not. They're the same. So who gets the promotion? Who gets that? Mostly, well, not you. No, I'm privileged. I had promotions, but it took me a lot of hard working, and my peers were really good to me. But I don't see that much of advance. And I also see, and that's something I learned, especially in New York, that because here had the longer history of the Asian Americans, and after the Chinese Exclusion Act, the evolution of how Chinatown became marketing, so people will go there and consume. We imported that from Spain. Like, okay, this work, we are cooking chop suey too, but we don't eat chop suey. My family doesn't eat that. But we put the same symbols, the red lanterns and that. And somehow the generation of my parents and the generation that were here knew that it was marketing. But the generation that was born there, such as me, we didn't know. So we mistook marketing for identity. And it's not just the work, it's just how we relate with ourselves and our culture of origin is still on the mix. So we are like, I think we're kind of confused because I didn't know how it went because Chen Dasai called it reorientalization. No, we are reorientalizing to perform this fantasy of Asian whatever because that's supposed to be your place. But and it's of course those symbols are different for the Chinese that come to study or from my parents, but we are not migrants in Spain. So how do we relate to that? How does that transform into poetry or work? Because I don't put red lanterns in my house. What is it? So I was thinking there's a red lantern because it's my restaurant. We use that. It was marketing. But in my house, no. We just put the food symbol, maybe turn around, and because my parents are Christian, we don't do it anymore. They say, it's a sin. We just put the cross. Y ya está, you know? So I was thinking, how do we relate to ourselves and how in that relationship with ourselves, the art, the dialogue, the written needs to evolve, and how you can get money. Because I want to pay the rent, and I love buying stuff. So, so what if we evolve or of dialogue? What if we do stuff and nobody buys it, and nobody give us better job? That's something that's haunting me really, because I think, for example, the academia in Spain will have never give me this position because it's very archaic still. But I'm here. So is Spain going to go forward quickly? Is it going to be the distribution of opportunities? And now I'm going to critique another film. No? It's called Don't Look at It because it's a piece of nada. No? They copy me too, with no shame. I mean, Gazpacho Agridulce was released 10 years ago. There was one page, and I was having this argument with my mom because I wanted to celebrate my birthday in McDonald's like all the kids do. So they just copy it and say in the film, this girl, she asked her mom to celebrate her birthday in Burger King. And they had my photo on the script and the cast because I was a role model to follow. And they did that with no shame. And guess what ethnicity was the director who got millions to make the movie? She was not Chinese, of course. But she hired Chinese advisor for, of course, very low money. So yeah, we can evolve, but until a certain point, you can do something by yourself. But if the surrounding doesn't accompany you, doesn't give you better jobs or opportunities or things to do stuff, I think the talent fly away. Like the scientists that I write and I do the comics for, they work for Harvard, for Columbia, they work for amazing labs, but they are not in Spain. And in Spain, it's a very comfortable place to live. I'm telling you, the food is good, the beer is cheap. but if you want to do something artistic or do something more, like I feel there is a limitation, and it's there.
I want to thank Chuen, Wan, and Mary Kate. Thank you so much for this conversation. Please, please, please come back to our next 3 events with Chuen this semester. Please also know that Chuen is here all semester long. She's going to have this exhibition. I know she's really enjoying connecting with people. Join us for reception out in the atrium. And please, 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 thank you for coming. And we hope to see you again very soon.
Qué bonito, qué bonito.